"Get on your knees now," Claire Weston's voice sliced through the air like a command from a queen. I froze, my heart pounding as the asphalt burned through my pants. I was kneeling in front of my own house, humiliated hands zip-tied behind me. A young boy watched from across the street, asking, "Why is she on the ground, Mommy?" No one spoke up, no one moved. Claire smiled, thinking she had the power. But what she didn't know was that by making me kneel, she had just sealed her fate. In a few weeks, I'd be the one holding the power. Claire Weston strutted up to me, clipboard in hand, her heels clicking against the pavement like she was walking down a runway. She was the HOA president, and she thought she could control everything, my property, my life, even my dignity. "I don't like your fence," she said, her tone sharp, as if her words were law. I'd received a warning for a perfectly fine fence, but this was something else entirely. She was making a power play, trying to remind me who was in charge. "Why don't you just do what I say and save yourself the trouble?" Claire sneered, her eyes scanning me like I was some kind of problem to fix. I stood my ground, but inside I could feel the anger bubbling up. The audacity. "You don't get to tell me what to do with my property, Claire," I shot back, voice steady. She didn't like that. She hated it. Claire took a step closer, and I could almost feel the heat of her frustration. "I've been doing this for 15 years, she said, the smugness thick in her voice. "You'll learn who runs things around here." But what Claire didn't know, what she couldn't have possibly understood, was that this wasn't a game. I wasn't the kind of person who'd back down, especially not now. This was no longer about a fence. It was about standing up to someone who thought they were untouchable. And soon, Claire would learn just how wrong she was. The first few weeks after Claire Weston forced me to kneel were the hardest. I should have expected it, but nothing prepares you for the constant drip of harassment that comes with dealing with someone like her. It started with notes left on my door. Little things. "You're in violation of HOA rules. Your grass is too long." I didn't even bother responding. But I knew. Claire wasn't trying to keep the neighborhood pretty. She was trying to break me. Then came the fines. First for my fence, then for my mailbox being slightly askew. Every time I tried to fix one thing, she found something else. I started getting calls from other residents who had been harassed by her too, each story more ridiculous than the last. I kept telling myself I couldn't let her get to me. But Claire's methods were relentless, like a mosquito buzzing in your ear until you want to scream. And the worst part, she wasn't even subtle about it. I'd catch her in the yard, clipboard in hand, walking around like she owned the place. She'd look over at me with that smug smile, nodding as if to say, "I see you." I'd had enough. So when Claire came to my property one afternoon, I knew it was time to stand up to her. I had been working on my car, fixing the engine, when I noticed her walking up my driveway with that damn clipboard again. My stomach dropped. "Afternoon," she called out, smiling. But I knew the smile was just a mask. "I see you're doing work again. Is everything okay with the car?" She was inspecting my driveway, not even trying to hide it. "No, it's not okay," I replied, wiping my hands on a rag. "I'm fixing it." "Is that a problem?" "Actually, yes," she said, eyes flicking over the vehicle. "It's on your property, but it's taking up space. You're causing a disruption." I shook my head, feeling the anger rise. "You've got to be kidding me. It's my driveway, my property. You don't get to tell me what to do." Her smile faltered just for a second, but she quickly recovered. "Well, I'm going to have to take some photos." "You're still in violation." Before I could protest, she was already snapping pictures. Without asking, without permission, she crossed the line again. It was one thing to give a warning. It was another to step onto my property and violate my space like this. I felt a pang of frustration, but I swallowed it down. This wasn't over. A few days later, the real damage began. I had just returned home after running some errands when I saw the notice on my door. Another violation. My mailbox, which had been fine for the past decade, was now improperly placed. I couldn't believe it. I ripped the paper off the door, my fingers trembling with fury. It didn't stop there. A few days later, I noticed that my garden was being dug up. At first I thought maybe it was some neighborhood kids, but when I took a closer look, I saw Claire's landscaping crew working on my property. She'd hired them without permission, taking it upon herself to redo my front yard. She didn't even have the decency to ask. I stormed over to her house, fury building in my chest. She was sitting in her yard, enjoying her afternoon tea like she hadn't just crossed the line again. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" I yelled, my voice shaking with anger. Claire's eyes widened for a moment, but she quickly masked her surprise with that same smug grin. "I'm fixing up the neighborhood. Your garden wasn't up to standards." "You're ruining my property," I shouted. "You've crossed the line again. You can't just come on my land and do whatever you want." "Oh, I can," she said, setting her teacup down. The HOA has the power to make sure everything is up to code. You'll thank me when this place looks nice." I couldn't hold back anymore. I snapped. "I never asked for your help, and I don't want it. You're making my life a living hell. I've had enough of this." Her smile didn't waver, but her eyes narrowed with something colder. "You'll regret this. Just wait." It wasn't long before Claire escalated things even further. She called the city on me, claiming I was running an illegal business out of my home, the car repairs. It was all part of her plan to push me out of the neighborhood to take control of everything. She got the city inspectors involved, and suddenly I was being scrutinized every minute. The inspector showed up one morning, knocking on my door like I was some kind of criminal. I had to explain everything about my work, my property, my business. It felt like being put on trial just for trying to make a living. But that wasn't the worst part. When the inspector left, Claire was right there, clipboard in hand. She watched me through her window like a hawk. Every time I stepped outside, she was there, staring, watching. It felt like I was being hunted. And then things took a turn for the worse. I found a letter in my mailbox, one that wasn't from Claire. It was from the HOA's legal team. They were suing me for violating their arbitrary rules they'd made up just to tear me down. I knew this was more than just a property dispute. This was a war, and Claire had just taken it to the next level. I reached my breaking point that night. I was sitting at my kitchen table staring at the lawsuit, the stack of fines, and the pile of photos Claire had taken of my property. She had documented everything, and now it was clear she wasn't going to stop until I was gone, until I gave in. I grabbed my phone and dialed the number I had been avoiding, the lawyer. If I was going to fight this, I needed help. But even as I spoke to the lawyer, a part of me knew this wasn't just a legal battle. It was personal now. Claire had taken everything from me, my peace, my land, my privacy. I was done playing by her rules. I decided right then that I was going to fight back with everything I had. Claire had no idea what she had just set in motion. The HOA might have their lawyers, their rules, their money, but they didn't have the truth on their side. And I was about to show them just how far I was willing to go. The community meeting was packed, tension thick in the air. I had been preparing for this day for weeks, and now as I stepped into the crowded room, I could feel the eyes on me. Claire Weston was sitting at the front as usual, her smug expression unwavering. She had no idea what was coming. I walked straight to the front of the room where the board members were sitting, their eyes flicking to me with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. Claire didn't even acknowledge me. She was too busy flipping through her notes, acting like she controlled everything. "Ladies and gentlemen of the board, I'm here to discuss a matter that has gone on for far too long," I said, my voice loud and clear, cutting through the room. "For the past few months, I have been harassed by the HOA, specifically by Miss Weston. This is no longer just about property violations. This is about power, abuse of power." A murmur spread through the room, but Claire's face remained impassive, almost smug. She was confident, but it wasn't going to last. "I've documented every fine, every letter, every intrusive visit from the HOA, and I've gathered something else, evidence of discrimination, of an abuse of power that goes beyond property disputes. This is not about grass length. This is about control." Claire's eyes narrowed. I could see her grip tightening around her pen. She didn't like this. She didn't expect me to fight back, and she certainly didn't expect me to have what I had. I took a deep breath, stepped up to the podium and pressed play on the small remote in my hand. The projector clicked to life, and a video began to play on the screen behind me. It was Claire herself caught on camera at the community meeting months ago, saying things that she thought were off the record. The video showed her speaking casually to a group of neighbors, bragging about how she had found a flaw in my property, about how she planned to push me out of the neighborhood. "It's not just about the fence," she said on the recording. "It's about teaching people like her a lesson. They think they can get away with whatever they want, but I'll make sure they learn their place." Gasps filled the room. I looked over at Claire. Her face had drained of color. Her jaw was clenched tight, her fingers shaking around her notes. "You wanted a war, Claire," I said, my voice steady but dripping with venom. "Well, here's your battlefield." The video switched, showing the countless photos Claire had taken of my property, every fine, every notice, every violation, all now laid bare. But that wasn't all. I clicked to the next slide, and the room went silent. "Let's talk about the fines you issued for my mailbox, Claire," I continued. "And the fact that you used your personal connections with the city to have those fines enforced, even when they weren't legally justified." I clicked again, and a legal document appeared on the screen, a letter from the city, confirming that the fines had been imposed unlawfully. "You thought you could control me through intimidation and manipulation. You were wrong." Claire's face was a mask of fury now, but she couldn't hide the fear in her eyes. She was losing control, and she knew it. The room was silent, the weight of the evidence hanging over us all. Claire stood up, trying to gather her composure, but the damage was already done. She looked like a deer caught in headlights. This is absurd, she stammered, her voice shaking for the first time. This is a smear campaign. I have done nothing wrong. All of this is lies, no Claire, I said, stepping closer. What's absurd is the way you've abused your position. What's absurd is the way you've ruined people's lives for your own gain. This isn't just a mistake. This is a pattern of behavior. And it's over. I turned to the board. You can ignore the law, ignore fairness, and continue to let her manipulate you. But you can't ignore the truth. Not anymore. Not after this. The board members were looking at each other, exchanging uneasy glances. One of them, an older man named Richard, cleared his throat. Miss Weston, you're relieved of your duties as HOA president effective immediately. Claire froze. The room erupted into a mix of whispers and murmurs, but she stood there shaking with rage and disbelief. The downfall was complete. Your position with the HOA is terminated, Richard continued. This meeting is adjourned. As Claire walked out of the room, her head hanging low, I knew this was just the beginning. She hadn't only lost her position, she'd lost everything she thought she controlled. Her empire had crumbled in front of her. The weight of the room lifted, but there was no sense of victory. Not yet. I wasn't done. Not until every last piece of her corruption had been exposed. The crowd erupted in applause, but I kept my gaze fixed on Claire's retreating figure. This wasn't about celebration. It was about justice, and it had just begun. The room was buzzing with a strange mixture of relief and disbelief. Claire had been removed, her reign of terror over the neighborhood finally over. But as I walked out of the meeting, the applause echoing in my ears, I felt more drained than triumphant. It was a hollow victory, but one that meant something for everyone who'd suffered in silence for years. Neighbors who had once been too scared to speak out were now coming up to me, shaking my hand, thanking me. Missus Collins, who had been too timid to even make eye contact with me before, hugged me tightly, whispering, "You've done what we all wanted to but couldn't. Thank you." I smiled, feeling the weight of it all. It wasn't just me. We did this together. Others began to approach, nodding in agreement. We were stronger as a community, now united by the fight against Claire and the fight for fairness. No more walking on eggshells, no more living in fear. The changes had already begun. People were no longer afraid to speak up, to challenge the rules that had been bent and twisted to suit one person's agenda. It wasn't long before the full legal fallout hit. The district attorney's office launched an investigation into Claire and the rest of the HOA board. The charges mounted: abuse of power, illegal fines, harassment. Claire's actions had left a trail of damage not just to my property, but to the entire neighborhood. And it wasn't just the fines. The way she used her influence to push people around was unforgivable. The local media covered the case extensively, and Claire's fall from grace was swift. She was charged and facing significant legal consequences. Watching her sit in court, realizing the empire she'd built had crumbled, was one of the most satisfying moments of my life. The news spread quickly. Residents who had once been too afraid to file complaints found their voices again. As more people came forward, the pressure on Claire only intensified. She was eventually convicted, and the HOA was forced to disband. Months later, the neighborhood had undergone a complete transformation. The once fractured community was now united, the oppressive shadow of Claire Weston gone for good. It was amazing what could happen when people stopped being afraid. We elected a new HOA president, someone who actually cared about the neighborhood, not about controlling people. I stood in my yard one afternoon, surveying the area Claire had once tried to ruin. The garden was now blooming beautifully with flowers that hadn't been there before. My neighbors had pitched in to help rebuild what Claire had tried to take away, and it felt like a fresh start for all of us. As I leaned down to touch the flowers, my phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen, another update about Claire. Her conviction was final, and the state had imposed additional penalties on her, including restitution for the damage she caused to the residents. The justice system had finally worked, and I couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. She'd tried to break us, but we were stronger than she'd ever anticipated. I stood up and looked around the neighborhood, now peaceful, thriving. The fight hadn't been easy, but it had been worth it. Claire thought she could control us, but in the end, it was her own downfall that proved we weren't the ones who were powerless. Sometimes the person they try to break ends up being the one who takes them down, I muttered to myself with a smile. And that was the truth. We weren't just survivors, we were victors.